you bringing your story of OCD and being in the NFL to the forefront.
I can really remember like the first stages of my scrupulosity. I got to the point where I was thinking different sins in my mind, like what was the most major sin I committed, and I would review those moments over in my head over and over and over again, because I felt like I had to feel a certain amount of guilt, and it was never enough for me to feel it. Things that I used to enjoy, like football, hanging out with my family, like it just took a back seat to what I was thinking with my OCD. I just wasn't happy. After that treatment, it's like all that kind of just like melted away. And, it kind of felt like it kind of gave me like this supreme confidence. Okay. And I felt very confident, like, all right, like you basically had my back against the wall, and now it's my time to fight back. And I just kind of tell my OCD, like, I really just don't care, man.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Before we get started, I wanted to share an important note about today's conversation. Our guest will be discussing their personal experience using psychedelic substances and other alternative approaches for OCD. It's important to understand that while there's a growing interest and ongoing research into psychedelics as a potential therapy for OCD, these treatments are not currently approved by the Federal Drug Administration and lack sufficient evidence to be considered standard care. At NOCD, we're deeply committed to evidence-based treatment, specifically exposure and response prevention, or ERP therapy, which is the most effective and well-researched treatment for OCD. If you'd like to learn more about ERP and how it can help you or someone you love, please reach out to us at nocd.com. We're here to help. Now, let's get into today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to another episode of the Get to Know OCD podcast. We're thrilled to have you here. And if you like the Get to Know OCD podcast, well, you can check us out at our NOCD YouTube channel and subscribe there, or you can get it anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. Today, sporting one of the greatest beards ever to appear on the podcast, may I say, we have Braden Smith from the Indianapolis Colts. Hello, Braden. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you today.
Well, and I appreciate you and you bringing your story of OCD and being in the NFL to the forefront, because it's so important to take things that have been silent for so long and bring them out to the open so that we help to reduce stigma and we create a greater understanding for people about mental health instead of just physical. I mean, I think there's so much discussion, especially in football, right? You see the injuries and things like that, but there's not a lot of talk about the mental health side. So thank you for being open to discussing that today.
Yeah, of course.
Now, we'll get into OCD a little bit, but I'm assuming, because boy, it's got to be an amazing experience to spend your life playing football and then to get drafted into the NFL. And I'm just wondering, what's that day like, that experience, like that phone call? It's got to be a surreal moment.
Yeah, so it was pretty exciting. I mean, it's kind of like one of those, hallmark moments you can kind of think of, just the surreality of it. I was at my wife's softball game when we were in college. She wasn't my wife yet, but we knew we were going to get married. But I promised that I was going to be there with her when it all went down. And literally the national anthem started playing. And that's when I got the call. So, the softball game was at Texas A&M. So, a bunch of Texans are looking at me on my phone while the national anthem is going on. Give me
doesn't go over well, does it, Braden?
I got to take this call, guys. It's pretty important. But, that moment, really changed my life. I mean, a lot has happened with me and my wife in Indianapolis the last 8 years. And, it's, our first house, our first child, spending our married days there. So it's been a big part of our life. And, it's, kind of home to us for the most part.
OCD is a part of your story and has been a part of your story of being in the NFL. And I'm wondering, to the extent that you're willing to share, how did you start to notice OCD being a part of your life and it finally lead to a diagnosis for you?
Yeah, like I've, kind of looking back and having really some time to reflect on it. I've had OCD for a very long time. Like there was different things here and there, but nothing that was like really affected my daily life for the most part. And, last year was when I really came into my faith. I just had my newborn son,
Mm,
looking at things from a different light. And, I wanted to really dive into my faith. Growing as a human being, becoming a father, I thought that was a very important part of my life. And, you know, there's a lot of new things to me and not really fully committing to faith before then, you know, now that I was fully committed to it. And, there's a lot of questions, whenever I do something, I want to make sure that I'm doing it the right way. And, yeah, things, when coming into faith was when I really noticed my OCD, because it became every minute, every second of my life
mhm.
was consumed by OCD. And that's what really kind of took a hold for me. And, I knew something was wrong. My wife knew something was wrong. And honestly, the first time I really kind of considered it being OCD was I randomly came across something like a little online article talking about religious scrupulosity. And I was like looking at all the things. I'm like, this kind of sounds like what I have.
Mm, mhm.
And that was about 3 months before I actually received the official diagnosis. But it was just kind of, one of those things where you just kind of stumble upon it. And, that's the first time I really like thought like maybe I do have like OCD.
So OCD loves a stressor, and OCD also loves things that are important to you. And those are the two things that it will attack. So having a child, though it can be a wonderful thing, also a big stressor in people's lives, right? And
Yeah.
I have heard of dads developing what we call perinatal OCD, which can be from the point of conception through a year or two after birth, that is enough of a stressor for OCD to really kick into high gear.
Yeah. I mean, also, I think a big contributing factor was this was like the first moment in my life that I really had just time to like sit and think,
Mm,
because it was off season, just had the child, we're not going anywhere, we're not traveling anywhere. And 2 weeks prior to his birth, I had knee surgery.
okay.
So, not really able to do too much, just giving my knee time to heal. So I just had time to think. And, I have all these new things that I'm discovering. And, obviously, like an idle mind was a very dangerous place
Yeah.
for OCD, when you're not constantly occupied. I had that time to think, or allow, I had time for my mind to kind of just do whatever it wanted to do. And I didn't know how to handle that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because OCD does love the ability to sit and think a lot, and then to talk about it a lot as well. I'm assuming you've also seen too, where it would love to have multiple discussions multiple times a day about all these topics, and yet never fully accept an answer. Right?
Yeah, where there's one answer, there's five more questions that come with that answer.
I've often said OCD is a yeah, but what if disorder, right? It doesn't matter what answer you probably got. There was always some yeah, but what ifs to follow it.
Yeah, that was definitely the case. And I can really remember like the first stages of my scrupulosity. For me, it was like a lot of guilt with like past sin. And, I got to the point where I was thinking, I was weighing different sins in my mind. Like, what was the most major sin I
Hmm.
committed? And I would review those moments over in my head over and over and over again, because I felt like I had to feel a certain amount of guilt, and it was never enough for me to feel it. And I had to keep doing it over until I felt like, all right, like I actually do truly feel guilty for this. I do feel sorry for this. I'm not just, you know, feeling this certain type of way just because I got caught per se, I guess you could say. So it was kind of like, obviously it's like one of those questions that, my OCD was like, do you actually feel sorry for what you did? Or are you just sorry that you got caught type of thing?
Right.
So I'd review those things over and over. And yeah, that was like kind of the first stage of it, I felt like.
Yeah. So for those who aren't aware, just I'll give a little thing. Scrupulosity can be about morals or ethics or about religion. And it's the name we get to OCD about those topics. And for those who have it on the religious side, like you said, there's the review of your whole history. Have you had enough acts of contrition for any potential sins you've had? Should you be punished for things that you hadn't been punished before? Did you say prayers at the right time and the right way and the right place and the right tone and the right volume? And have you really been saved? How do you know for sure that that's the case? And maybe you need to do that again just in case it didn't work right the first time. Were those the kinds of things that were going through your head and happening?
Oh, 100%. And, the worst part was, I would look for the definite answer to those, like, obviously going over in my head. But then one of the worst things I could have possibly done was reassurance seeking. I did that through the first part was through going online and looking for answers there. And that stirred up so much more fear in me and more questions. And, I'd find 99 answers that I was looking for, and then I'd find the one that would just cause a question in me. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was an endless rabbit hole search.
What everyone tells me is like, I got those 99 answers and I just wanted one more and then I knew I'd be okay. But it was that one then that I found. It was like, oh, why did I have to do that? And then it started it again. Did that happen to you? Yeah.
Oh, multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. Think of it, there's never an end to it.
No. And that can lead to issues family wise too, right? Because people can get easily frustrated at their family, their spouse, anybody else, because they just aren't giving them the answers that they're searching for. Did that kind of happen in your life? And like it was tough to interact with people after a while because they just couldn't give you what you wanted?
Yeah, because I definitely message like different priests, and
Yeah.
I just keep asking about what if, and I'd have the same conversations with my wife, and I'd be like, well, but it really felt like I meant this, or I meant that, or I thought this, and she couldn't give me the answer I was looking for. I mean, no one really could, and I don't know if it was necessarily frustration that was like coming about, at least early on. Early on, there was just like a lot of fear, a lot of hopelessness, and like, I kind of really just crawled into a shell, and you know, yeah, there was just a lot of like hopelessness and just like I don't have the answer, I don't know what the answer is, like, and just fearing the worst, like expecting the worst and not hoping for the best, not having faith in good things, but believing that the worst is going to happen always.
And it's not uncommon, and I'm not sure if this happened for you, but it's not uncommon for people to start feeling kind of down or depressed too, because you've pulled yourself out of a lot of your life of things you enjoyed trying to find the answers to this thing and never being satisfied. And it can just feel like you're stuck in that rabbit hole too. Did you notice like a mood change that came along with it as well?
Very much. I mean, things that I used to enjoy, like football, hanging out with my family, like it just took a back seat to what I was thinking with my OCD. And, I just wasn't happy. I didn't enjoy things. It's like, how can I focus on anything in the present moment? Like I got all these things I need to worry about, like all these things I need to do before, before I die, or before like such and such happens. It's a lot of sense of urgency. It's like, I need to do these things right now. Like, another thing that would pop into my head, it's like, if I were to die right now, did I do everything right? And, that's the constant thing, like, fear of like, not, I don't want to say like going outside my house, but like there was that fear, like, man, I got to make sure, like, I'd be a little bit more cautious. Like, I don't want to accidentally like drive off the side of the road or something like that. And then, I'm in big trouble now because I didn't, do my prayers right.
Right. You die with that mortal sin still on your soul, that's a lot of purgatory ahead of you or something like that, right? Those types of things. Yeah. I like what you said too about it's hard to be present, because I've always said OCD keeps you in the past or in the future. Like in the past, in terms of digging up everything that may have gone wrong. In the future, which can even be in an afterlife future, right? It doesn't even have to be while you're alive. It could be after you die kind of future too. Did you find that you were always stuck everywhere else but right now?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like I said, reviewing things from the past, feeling guilt about the past. Like, man, if I could have only changed that, man, I would have done it this way, that way. And then obviously worrying about the future. Like, and, there's like this thing in my head. I said, for the first 28 years of my life, I screwed up. So I need 28 more years to make up for those other
year for
years.
eye for an eye, year for a year kind of thing.
Yeah. So very much non the present. Couldn't care less about the present. It's just like we got things to do and none of that matters right now.
Mm-hmm. It gets to a point for you where you're not getting those needs met, right? You're not getting the answers, and there's options for treatment. We at NOCD, we do exposure and response prevention therapy. That's kind of the gold standard of treatment out there for OCD, but there's other treatments that are being researched that other people are doing. We've had people on the podcast like Dr. Carolyn Rodriguez, who's talked about alternative treatments. And those were some of the things that you looked at. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you did for treatment and how you found that and how it worked for you.
Yeah. So, obviously the first step for me was just getting a therapist, getting someone that even, knew anything about OCD, because that was a whole new realm for me. So, we started off with that, just kind of traditional, like exposure response therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think it helped for the most part, but I was still in just kind of one of those stages where I was juggling so much with football and then trying to juggle this that I can't quite lock in on it.
Mm-hmm.
I tried TMS.
Okay.
Which is, I don't know, they put that little helmet on you and
yeah,
dock some things.
Transcranial magnetic stimulation. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tried ketamine. Yeah, there's just a lot of different things I tried. Tried medicine, pharmaceuticals, kind of help with all of that. I had a intensive stay in Colorado, at a mental health facility for 48 days.
Okay.
And for me, it wasn't quite working very well. And the mental health facility that I was staying at wasn't OCD specific. So I think obviously that was a big part that wasn't helping me. Mm-hmm. But, something that I found really helped was some psychedelic therapy. I know I talked about ketamine, but the one that really helped me the most was called ibogaine, and also 5-MeO DMT. And I went to a place called Ambio Life, and I did this treatments for 5 days. And the way I would explain it, I can talking about ibogaine and 5-MeO and my whole experience. That'd take a long time. It was quite the experience. But it was a very, very eye-opening experience. And I would say, it kind of broke down the wall for me. The wall, like, I knew all these things about OCD, but they didn't internally resonate with me. Like, I knew it was OCD, but it didn't resonate. And it kind of broke down this wall. Like, it opened up all these doors into my mind to kind of see things from a different perspective that I wasn't able to prior to that treatment. And then after doing that treatment, I went to Alabama. My wife and their family, they have like this nice property where it's just kind of out in the middle of, nowhere, just beautiful, beautiful land. And, we spent two months out there, but for 2 weeks I did 3 hours a day, OCD specific treatment for 2 weeks, just out there, just hitting it hard, had this opportunity to learn all these new skills and actually, and I'll kind of back up because I feel like the ibogaine really gives you the opportunity to learn new skills. Like it stays in your system for 3 months, and all these pathways that have been created, what you associate everything with are kind of cleared, and you're able to kind of rewire how you think. And that's why I say, like, I'm actually able to learn these new skills and apply them. And, you know, that's when things started to internally resonate with me. And, I have a great therapist, still work with them.
Good.
And, I think that's important. But, I did the 2 weeks, 3 hours a day, and then, went down to twice a week
Mm-hmm.
for like a month or two. And then, I think, once a week. And now we're to the point where, I just kind of do check-in, and,
Awesome.
it's been really, really helpful. I think the psychedelic therapy was, very beneficial for me.
So that kind of opened the door, and then you could do some of the ERP work after that and have better results. Is that kind of what it was? Or
Yeah,
Mhm.
I feel like the Ibogaine and the 5-MeO combined really helped kind of take away a lot of that fear and anxiety.
Sure.
Like after that treatment, it's like all that kind of just like melted away.
Mm-hmm.
And, it kind of felt like it kind of gave me like this supreme confidence. Like
Okay.
I felt very confident, like, all right, like, you know, you basically had my back against the wall, and now it's my time to fight back. And, you know, I kind of took it on as a challenge, and, just kind of gave me that internal, like, to really go and fight it back against my OCD versus like letting it do whatever it wanted to me, essentially.
That's awesome. So you're open up now to feeling that confidence, to fighting back. How did you start to face scrupulosity in a different way after that treatment experience? What were you able to do that you weren't doing before?
Well, I think, how I talk about I was very fearful and anxious like during the time before the treatment, and, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't willing to really push that limit. And then I think after that, underneath all that fear and anxiety was a lot of like anger and frustration. And, I had a lot of anger and frustration with the OCD,
Mm-hmm.
everything that I was doing. So, and that kind of fed into some of the obsessions and stuff like that. I kind of had this realization, like whenever I allow these negative emotions to kind of control me, then that's when it feeds on these negative emotions and allows these thoughts to come in. Because for me, it'd be like, I'm getting angry. Then, my mind's trying to tell me, oh, you're angry at God because you think
Mm-hmm.
God's doing this to you. And, try to spin things around. But, it just got to a point where I kind of had that realization. It's like, I know this isn't God. I know this isn't a battle between good and evil. Like, this is my OCD. Like, this is a mental illness. And you know what? It wants me to do all these things. How about I just start doing the opposite? My therapist really kind of helped me with that.
Mm-hmm.
He told me a story about this guy who wrote this book, and basically when he was a kid, he'd have all these nightmares about like dinosaurs like chasing him around, and then eventually to get eaten. And then one night, the guy was like, "Hey, like my nightmares end up the same way all the time. So what if instead of running away, I run towards the dinosaur and jump straight into its mouth?"
Yeah.
And then after a while, those nightmares just went away.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like that story, and I've told a lot of people about that. It's a very simple story, but it's just kind of like, you know what? I'm gonna call my OCD's bluff. I'm gonna do the opposite of what it says, and that's kind of like the exposure. Like I'll say these things, and
Yeah.
you know, added humor to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
whenever I get the exposure, just kind of making fun of it for what it is. Take some of the seriousness away from it. But and I realized that that plays a big part in my life, just in general, like in everyone's life. Fear stops us from doing a lot of things that can help us to be the human we were created to be. So not only did that do that with OCD, but just like in my everyday life, it's kind of like, all right, what are the things that, you know, and it's not like I'm seeking them out, but like sometimes I'll come across things that's like, I don't really feel like I should, or like some irrational fears, like I don't really know if I want to get involved with that. But it's kind of like, you know what? That's kind of letting fear control me. So I'm gonna do the opposite of what my mind's telling me. And obviously, there's a certain level to it. Like I'm not going to go up to a rattlesnake and touch on the head and
No.
prove a point, but it's just
Yeah.
like things that I
Yeah.
know are not actually harmful, but my mind's telling me that they are.
There are some people who will hear that and think, you know, you're in a scrum with all these massive men just beating each other play after play. And you could do that without any fear, but you would fear something in your mind. Obviously some folks just don't understand the difference between those two. So what would be your message to someone who may not get that the mental piece can be even more frightening than the physical side of things, right?
Yeah, I just, if I were to say one thing, watch the movie Inception. That would be some
Okay.
advice too, because I think that goes to show like a great deal of what kind of goes on in the mind too. Just like, because I talk to myself sometimes, like, am I getting caught up in the dream or am I living in reality? Because they both seem very real.
Mm-hmm.
Like that threat that your mind's telling you about seems very real, but in reality, it's nothing but just a bunch of makeshift thoughts in your mind.
Yeah.
But no, you go ahead. I
Well,
think
I
I'm cutting
just,
that a little bit.
one of the things that people say to me when I do webinars is it feels so real. And why does it have to feel so real? And I always say, well, A, if it didn't feel real, I wouldn't have a job. But B, it feels so real because it really triggers that fight, flight, or freeze response. So I'm assuming in your head when that thought about religion was there, that you just felt this ultimate fear that you had to do something about it right away, because if you didn't, the worst case, most awful, terrible thing could potentially happen.
Yeah, and I kind of got to a point where, I'm trying to hold off these thoughts all the time. And they got to a point where I'd actually feel like just this clarity and this peace when I did have those terrible thoughts that I was avoiding. Because then, there's nothing for me to guard against anymore. It's like the worst thing that could happen. It just happened. I had those thoughts I wasn't supposed to have. Like nothing happened. Like now I can just go about my day. Like if that's the worst thing, it's like the worst thing for me was the buildup of the fear. It's kind of like when you're a little kid and you believe that there's a boogeyman in your closet,
Sure.
and you always stay away from that closet, and that builds up the fear, builds up the anticipation. But then obviously you'll have those one nights it's like, all right, like I'm just going to go up to it, I'm going to open it up, I'm going to look at it, and then that fear no longer has any more power. It's taken away. Since it's October, you kind of think of all the horror movie marathons. You
Yeah.
think about all the villains. Like, I think Nightmare on Elm Street's a great one. What's the villain thrive on? Fear. Like,
Fear.
that's what gives it power. And then the antagonist, she goes up to him and basically says, like, you're nothing. Like, I take away all the power you ever gave me. And the villain's defeated that way. It's just kind of the same thing with OCD. Like, it only has as much power as we give it until one day it's just like, you know what? I see the things you're telling me to worry about, and you know what? I'm going to just walk up to it and see what happens. Because I think the further you try to avoid it, stay away from it, the more it's just going to have a hold on you. So it's just like, all right, either, I kind of think that's where the anger and frustration came. It's like, all right, like I'm done doing this charade. Like I'm going to do my exposures and see what happens.
Yeah. So as you expose yourself now to things about religion or things pop into your head, and you really do that response prevention work, right? You don't do the safety behaviors. There's not reassurance seeking anymore. There's no compulsions. What's your relationship with your faith now, even if some of those old thoughts still pop into your head now and then, as they will, just because OCD doesn't ever go away. You just learn how to live with it.
Yeah, I think my faith definitely looks a lot different now. Beforehand, I thought it was a lot of practice, like specific practices, like reading my Bible a certain way, doing prayer certain times a day, showing up to church, talking about God to people a certain way. And, it's very inorganic. And now I have a lot. First, I think the most important part for me is whenever those things do come up, those thoughts that come into my head is just reminding myself, like, this isn't a good versus evil thing. This isn't God versus whatever. This is OCD. Like, this has nothing to do with my faith or my belief. This is just my mind putting these thoughts into my head. But the second part is the way I go about my faith now. Like, it's very just organic to me. And, I think, every relationship is very unique, and it's the same way with God. And with me, like, I don't really get into the Bible as much. I don't do all these different things, but I feel like my connection with God is a lot stronger because I'll just have conversations with him. And, I don't have to do a certain practice. I don't have to do a certain ritual, but I do my practice just by living my daily life. Like, I have that acceptance that, I'm going to fall short. I'm going to try my best because I want to do my best. I want to be a better person. I know that's who I am. It's part of my values is that, I want to be a good husband, a good father, a good friend, a good human being.
Yeah.
And, I know I'm flawed, but I have that acceptance and, I can receive that grace now. But yeah, I think for me, it was like everyone was telling me what it looked like to be a Christian, what it looked like to follow God. But at the end of the day, like, what's bringing me truly closer to God? What's giving me a really fulfilling relationship with God? Not what someone tells me to do, not what my OCD tells me to do.
Right.
And it doesn't have to look the same for everyone, but you can do it in a way that is healthy and that you can really connect with God.
I like the idea if you go back to the original Aramaic and you look at sin is defined really as you miss the mark, so try again. But in current day translations, sin is you're going to hell, right? It's just like worst case scenario kinds of stuff. And I love that more original version of, hey, you missed the mark. Let's try it. And when I'm working with people with scrupulosity and we're doing our ERP, I try to go back to that idea of no one is asking you to be perfect other than your obsessive compulsive disorder, right? I mean, no one else is asking you to be perfect in this.
Yeah. And it's funny, like OCD made me dive so deep into it that I completely missed the point. I missed everything about God. And it's funny, like, I'm talking about how I don't really like, I'm not in scripture every day like I used to be, but I understand scripture a lot more. Like, from the stuff that I remember, I can see things that I didn't once see. Talking about like Jesus he's talking to the Pharisees. He's like, you're searching the scriptures for me, but I'm right here in front of you. And I think that kind of really resonates with me because like that's who I was. Like, I was missing God because I was so wrapped up in everything else that like God is all around us at all times. And and I really think going back to things like that I know now, like God talking to us, like receiving the kingdom of God like a child, we are God's children, and we're children. What do children do? They grow, they learn. What's the point? And maybe this is too heavy. Maybe this is my opinion, but I think the whole point of life is growth. Like, we are here to grow as individuals. And what happens when you grow? Like, growing pains, you make mistakes, you fall down, you disappoint, but you keep getting back up and you keep growing. And I think that's the big thing. And just having faith that it's going to be all good at the end. And, we're just having a positive outlook on things, like, because at the end of the day, if we're just worried about certain things, we're never going to grow. Like, if we're just constantly like worried about the ruler getting smacked across the hand, like, that's not what God's all about. And my OCD was trying to tell me, like, oh, like, any move that you make wrong, like, you're screwed.
I've said too, OCD does not like faith because faith is the acceptance or belief in something without absolute proof. And OCD says, oh no, we need the proof. You got to find the proof. So OCD and faith are diametrically opposed to each other.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't find more polar opposites than those two right there. When they clash hard.
They
And,
sure
I
do, don't
found
they?
out
Yeah.
in a very rough way. And, it's, it does suck because, I can go outside and, if I have any doubts, like about certain things, like I can go outside and be like, no, like I see this because this is right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Versus faith, it's it playground of the mind for the most part. And it's like, again, a lot of what ifs. Do I feel, am I like all the things you're kind of talking about? Am I saved? Am I doing this right? Do I have this belief? Everything's a measure, and it's really not meant to be.
Right. Yeah. And whenever you measure yourself up to OCD, you always fall short.
Well, 100%.
Yeah. I've never in 26 years met someone who's satisfied anything OCD asked them to do.
Yeah, everyone's going over on that one.
Yeah, right. That's the worst season you could have right there, isn't it? Trying to play against OCD and win. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's important what you said too, the idea that when you went away to a treatment center that didn't specialize in OCD, how you weren't going to really get what you were hoping for out of that, because OCD really does require a specialized treatment, and more of a general therapy for OCD is not going to really satisfy what you're going to need from a treatment point of view. So I'm thrilled that you were able later on, at least, to find the right treatment and to really get that help that you needed. That's great.
Yeah, I definitely think the place that I went beforehand, like just the mental health facility, definitely gave me greater awareness of the OCD. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't given the tools on how to fight back against it.
Right.
And there's one thing to notice it, and there's another thing to be able to fight back for sure.
Yeah. And the hardest part sometimes of fighting back of OCD is kind of like you said with the horror movie films, is fighting back means choosing not to engage instead of actually getting into a fisticuffs with OCD because you're not going to win in a fight with OCD. Right.
Yeah. And I should probably choose my words better in terms of that. Like, everything that you think is the right way to go about it, choose the opposite. So it's kind of like I said, like going against what your mind's telling you to do. Because, yeah, definitely there's times like, I would just get so frustrated. It's like, man, if I could just like smack the crap out of my OCD, but it's just like at the end of the day, it's like you're not going to win an argument against OCD. So all you can do is just like move on. And once I started to do that, easier said than done, of course.
Always.
It definitely takes time, but for me, like sometimes these thoughts will just come into my head, and I just kind of tell my OCD, like, I really just don't care, man. Like,
that's
do something else. I really just don't.
You got it. Yeah. You have it down now to be like, oh, yeah, sure. Throw that at me. Okay, whatever. Yeah. And move on. Right.
Say, oh yes, I'm this, I'm that. Okay, let's move on.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, and I love that, you play football and that you have a coach, because the other thing that I've done a lot for people who, again, maybe are wary about going into therapy and talking to someone else, I'll use the example of football and I'll say, no, people in the NFL are the cream of the crop of people who've ever played football. And it doesn't matter how much money they make, they still have a coach. Right. There's still someone there to bounce ideas off or to get opinions from. And I look at therapy in a similar way. It doesn't matter how together you think your life might be. You could benefit from being able to talk to someone else and getting a different perspective who could offer you some different ways of living your life. And you had that happen, which is great.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the fatal flaws to think that we have it all together. It's when you finally start to realize, like, I don't know what the crap I'm doing, is when you actually start to get it. Like, again, it's everything that people tell you, it's usually the opposite that ends up being the truth. Like, vulnerability is that strength. Because, I mean, without saying you have a problem, you can't address a problem, and, you don't have awareness to it. So I think having that awareness and that vulnerability is the greatest strength, and something that everyone really needs to go into, because it got to that point where I was just like, man, I need to talk to someone because I keep holding all this in. I keep keeping all this to myself and I'm about to lose my mind. And
Yeah.
there's just so many emotions that get built up and it feels like you're about to explode. And it's just terrible, terrible feeling.
And now I'm assuming a much better relationship with your child and your family and everything because OCD is not trying to get in the way of everything you do anymore.
Yeah, 100%. And, as much as I didn't like going through my OCD, it definitely has given me greater awareness. It'd just be the little places here and there that would creep into my everyday life that, would hinder me in some perspectives of performance on how I was as a father or a husband, friend. So grateful for that because now I can kind of see it for what it is and work through some things.
What advice do you give to people? Because now that you're out, I'm assuming people contact you and are like, I had no idea and I had something similar and I never told anybody. How do you react to that? That's got to be, on one hand, just amazing that people want to open up to you now and are so thankful for you being open about your experience. So what's that side of all of this been like for you?
Yeah, I think it's been really kind of rewarding that, I'm able to kind of help people in a certain way and not necessarily that I'm helping them through like giving them therapy or
Sure.
anything like that. But, I think as an OCD community, just like leaning on one another. And I think it's one of the things that really helped me. And it was just like, not, I don't think it was coincidence, but while I was going through the thick of it last year, I found out one of my teammates also had religious scrupulosity. So
Wow.
just knowing someone else had the same things going on, and he was like, "Yep, like I've had those same thoughts," and it just kind of gave me that hope and kind of peace. Like, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like he's gone through it, and they came out the other end. So it's just kind of like one of those things. Like you're not the only one going through it. Really gives strength. So
Yeah.
the fact that there's people that like I never knew this had a name, and it's kind of cool to be like, all right, this is what it is, because I don't think a lot of people know what OCD is for the most part, because media kind of makes it out to be like, oh, he likes to keep things straight or
Mm-hmm.
clean,
Mm-hmm.
like because most people are like, oh, I didn't realize you had OCD, like you never did this or that. I'm like, it was
Yeah.
all going off in my head. So
Right. You had a really messy room in college. How could you have OCD? Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you wouldn't think I'd have OCD the way I have my locker at the facility for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, just definitely like having someone to lean on, being vulnerable, like I said, being open to try anything. Because I think that's the biggest thing is like when you limit yourself on things that can help you out of fear or out of, caution, like the only way to beat this is to confront fear. I think that's the biggest thing is to confront your fear, obviously with someone that knows what they're doing. But also I know another thing though is we're responsible for our recovery and being able not just leaning on someone else, but taking it upon yourself, like to do the extra work, because that's the only way we kind of, make it through. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's your own mind that you got to deal with every day. So you got to take in your hands and
Yeah.
do what you can. But yeah, I guess those would just be like some of the things, like just be open to try anything, because psychedelic therapy for me was not on the radar
Sure.
whatsoever. And,
Sure.
I'm a big advocate for now, and I think it can really benefit a lot of people. And, when you come down to the wire and you've tried everything and nothing's worked and you're desperate, like it's always nice to have that option that you didn't know about. So
Yeah.
advocate for trying whatever you can is huge, and being vulnerable, talking to someone, and yeah, just voicing yourself.
That's awesome. And we've even had Zane Gonzalez on here too. He's the kicker, and he's got OCD. He's come to the podcast, and we've had a great chat too. So um, it's OCD's out there. It's everywhere. It doesn't matter line of work you are, sport you're in. There are people with it, and I again am so appreciative of you being here to talk about it, to bring it into the open, and to let people know again that it doesn't matter how big you are, how strong you are, because OCD will attack anyone that it can possibly get into, right? That's just what it will do.
100%. That's, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to talk about it, because I also think talking about it, takes away its power. And,
Yes.
it's just like when we keep it all in, that's where it kind of, festers in that darkness. But when you bring it out into the light, that's when, you can kind of start to take your life back and take the power back.
Awesome. Well, and you've also really helped us to kind of think about, this idea that there is still great research going on out there about alternate therapies and treatments. And there are plenty of labs that are doing this work. There are clinical trials that are happening about this. And so the best thing is follow the research, and you've done that. And I really appreciate that. So, for everyone out there who's looking for help, know that there are great treatments available. There's great gold standards of therapy. There's a lot of stuff being researched right now to see what alternative treatments might be helpful, or conjunctive therapies might be out there too. So one of the best ways to look for that is to check out the International OCD Foundation. Their website has some great information about that. And we're always happy to chat with you here at NOCD. That being said, Braden, thank you so much for being here today. Really, really appreciate your time and your openness. It means a lot.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity just to speak to y'all.
Awesome. And thank all of you for watching the Get to Know OCD podcast. If you like it, subscribe to the NOCD YouTube channel. If you're looking for help for OCD related conditions, check us out at NOCD.com. That's NOCD.com. And always remember, be better to yourself than your OCD ever will be. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.